need to be. But bottom line was, after going many places in the world and doing many things, and I ended up back in Houston, and I was, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had, by this time I had been recommended, I guess you could say, proposed for sannyas order, and I was in Houston, and then there was an emergency that happened in Fiji. Anybody here from Fiji? Anyway, there was an emergency. There was a preacher who was divisive, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj had just begun to build up a very sweet congregation and community in Fiji, and they were potentially under threat. So he brought me in his indomitable style, and those of you who are his disciples, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He said to me, okay, I was supposed to take sannyas in 1979, Mayapur. He said, okay, so there's this emergency, and I want you to take sannyas right now. But I wanted to take sannyas with Shivara Maharaj and Indradunda Maharaj and a couple of others that were very dear to me, and now they're very dear to many people. And he said, okay, either you take sannyas right now, or I'll see to it that you never take sannyas again in this life or in any other future life. That was his modus operandi. So I said, in my mind, I said, okay, just get me out of this room, whatever. Yes, of course. I expected him to take me right down to the temple room and, hand me the stick and then send me on my way that evening. He decided spontaneously to come guess where? To Dallas. And within 2 days, I was standing in front of Radha Kalachandji with my danda in hand. And then I remembered that prayer. And I hadn't remembered it, and I remembered that prayer. And ever since then, every time I see him, I say him, not that I'm trying to minimize Radharani, but yeah. That's why, one of the reasons why I'm very happy to be back here. I feel home here, feel at home. And of course, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was one of my dearest friends, and he received probably, arguably, the most training, direct training from Srila Prabhupada than anyone else in the movement. And I was very fortunate to have received a lot of direct training from him, close to Prabhupada. So I'm very fortunate. I have deep gratitude in my heart, and let me share some of that with you. Hare Krishna. So, what should I do? What should I do? Should I just talk or chant or? Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Urmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gada Mayam Dadati Sabadantikam Mukam Karadivachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Namashreshta Manum Api Sachiputram Atra Sarupam Rupam Tasyagajim Udupudim Maturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivadam Moho Radhika Madhavasam Prapto Yasya Patita Kripyo Shigurun Tannatosmi Vandeham Shiguru Shiyuta Padakamalam Shigurun Vaishnavangscha Shirupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sujivam Sadbhaitam Sadvadutam Purijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shirada Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vidangscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvije Namaha Nityananda Maham Naomi Sarvananda Karam Param Harinama Param Devam Avaduta Shiromanim Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Surupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabando Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Panamami Hari Priye Hantaya Madalabala Haridasya Vayo Yad Brahma Krishna Charanas Parasha Pramodaha Manam Tanoti Sahago Ganayostayo Yat Paniya Suyavasakandana Kandamulahai Matsamo Nasti Papatma Naparadi Nakasyana Puri Hare Pilajjame Kim Bruve Purushottama Yuvatinam Tata Yuni Yunam Cha Yavatau Yata Mano Bidabite Tadvam Mano Me Ramatam Twai Bhumau Skalita Padanam Bhumyareva Balam Banam Twayi Jatapadanam Tvam Eva Sharanam Prabho Govinda Balabe Radhe Parartye Tamaham Sada Tudiyam Iti Janatu Govindo Mam Tvaya Saha Radhe Vrindavanadishe Karunamitra Bahini Kripaya Tapapadabja Dasyam Mayam Pradiyatam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasiri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I'd like to read to you from an excerpt from a lecture that Srila Prabhupada gave I owe you one. In 1974, in Geneva, Switzerland. 1974 was a special year because the movement had expanded very rapidly, especially after 1972. 72, 73, 74. These were the years that it really expanded. I think Hayagriva Maharaj said explosion. He called it an explosion of Krishna consciousness. And one thing he noticed was that, especially his leaders, but everyone, were so inspired by him to spread the movement. They were working so hard, everyone, that they began to neglect the reading of his books. And this is not the only time he said it. He mentioned, to my knowledge, maybe many times more, but at least once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 times that year, he mentioned this. And I was in San Francisco, Rath Yatra, 1974, and I was sitting next to Vaisheshika Prabhu, and we were the leading distributors of Prabhupada's books in those days in that temple, and it was intense. So we expected him to inspire us to distribute his books. And the first words out of his mouth, and I didn't know about these other incidents in the things he'd said, but okay. But he said, "So, are you reading my books?" And Vaisheshika Prabhu and I looked at each other and we smiled because we were reading Prabhupada's books. I've always read Prabhupada's books. Just anything that has helped me stay in this movement through thick and thin, it's been the reading of Prabhupada's books. So I want to inspire you while I'm here to read Srila Prabhupada's books, but not as just a duty or something that if you don't do it, you're going to get in trouble, or, something bad's going to happen to you if you don't. But seriously, listen to this. Unless there's objection. Any objections? No objections. I got a no objection certificate. Okay. This is an excerpt from that lecture. June 3rd, 1974, Geneva. He's lecturing from Canto 1, Chapter 13, verses 12 through 14. Vidura particularly came to enlighten Dhritarashtra and to give him a lift to the higher status of spiritual cognition. It is the duty of the enlightened souls to deliver the fallen ones. And Vidura came for that reason. But talks of spiritual enlightenment are so refreshing that while instructing Dhritarashtra, Vidura attracted the attention of all the members of the family. And all of them took pleasure in hearing him patiently. This is the way of spiritual realization. The message should be heard attentively, and if spoken by a realized soul, it will act on the dormant heart of the conditioned soul. And by continuously hearing, one can attain the perfect stage of self-realization. Therefore, Shravanam is very essential. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. So in all our centers, I'll repeat, so in all our centers, this process should be followed. We have got now so many books. This was 1974. Simply if we read books, our Yogeshwar Prabhu is very enthusiastic to read books. So everyone should read books, and others should hear. There's my mandate. When I heard this, I said, that's it. My mandate, to read these books out loud to others and let them hear. So everyone should read books and others should hear. So that, listen, everyone should read books and others can hear. That means you're all supposed to read out loud and to as many people as possible. That's the way that this movement is spreading, through Srila Prabhupada's books. That is very essential. Shravanam. The more you hear, we have got so many books. Whatever is already published, just like we are describing one verse daily, so at least there are so many verses already in stock. You can go on speaking for 50 years. Just the books that he already had in stock. How many books were those? These books already published, you can go on. There will be no want of stock. This practice should be adopted. Don't waste time. As much as possible, try to hear about this transcendental subject matter, Bhagavatam. Yad Vaishvananam Priyam. It is stated that the Srimad Bhagavatam is very, very dear to the Vaishnavas, to the devotees. They are always reading Srimad Bhagavatam. That is their life and soul. So now we have already got 6 volumes. And further, how many? He's asking, because he's saying it sarcastically, because he's so ahead. And then he says, how many? 8 volumes are coming? He's 8 volumes ahead. So you all have enough stock. So you should read Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. That is the main business. That is pure devotional service. Because we cannot devote ourselves 24 hours in hearing and chanting. Therefore, we have extended our activities, program activities, in so many ways. Otherwise, Srimad Bhagavatam is so nice. If you practice anywhere, any condition, simply by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, you will be happy. So adopt this practice and make your spiritual life perfect more and more. Thank you very much. And everybody knows that's Prabhupada's the end of Prabhupada's lecture. So there's many, many points being made in this little excerpt. I'll say something emotional, don't mind. It's my nature, I can't help it. During that year, he said one thing. He said, my only disappointment is that my disciples are not reading my books. And it was prophetic. Because then after he left, so many devotees stopped reading the books. If you do this every day, if you read, and particularly I'm stressing in my own life and into everyone I speak to influence them to read out loud. Why this emphasis on out loud? Because you can only get Krishna through the ear. Even you can look at the deity and he's Krishna. The sound is none different than Krishna. There's one very nice prayer by Sanatana Goswami, by Rupa Goswami, I'm sorry. It's a prayer to the holy name. And in one of those prayers he says, Vacham, vachakamityudeti bhavato, nama surupa dvayam, purvasmat parameva hantu karunam, tatrapi janimahe, yastasmin bihita paradanivaha, prani samantad bhaved, asyene dumupasyaso bihisada nandam buddha majjati. O holy name, you manifest yourself in two forms. The Supreme Person you designate and the sound vibration that designates. We know that the second form is more merciful than the first. Hare Krishna. Thank you. We know that the second form is more merciful than the first because even if a person offends your first form in many ways, you plunge him into an ocean of transcendental bliss if he serves your second form with his voice. Serves his second form with his voice. So, Sanatana Goswami, the older brother of Rupa Goswami, also composed some very nice prayers about Srimad Bhagavatam. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. So here we have this extraordinary statement that the Bhagavatam is non-different than Krishna in the same way that the holy name of Krishna is non-different than Krishna, in the same way that the deity form of Krishna is non-different than Krishna. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 5th chapter, verses 23, 24, Prahlad Maharaj is explaining to his father. Do you know who his father was? Who knows? Hiranyakashipu. Who was Hiranyakashipu? He was the biggest demon in the universe, bar none, and the most powerful. And his son Prahlad was 5 years old, and Hiranyakashipu had a school, and in the school they taught what? Politics and economics, right? That's what everybody's after, right? Money and power, that's it. Full stop. So one day, Hiranyakashipu had his young son Prahlad brought into his presence, and he was on a throne, and this guy was heavy. You know, the demigods were lining up to offer tributes to him. If he just raised his eyebrow, they would go. So he said, "My dear Prahlad, what's the nicest thing, the best thing that you've learned in school?" And Prahlad Maharaj said, "Oh, my dear father, oh best of the demons, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smarnam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Dasa." You know, the 9 processes of devotional service. He got pretty angry, actually. And in that, the purport to those verses, Srila Prabhupada writes one of the longest purports in the book, in the Bhagavatam. And he comes to a place in the first, he writes an introduction, and then after the introduction, he starts to analyze each item individually. So I'm going to read to you the first 2 sentences of the first paragraph of that section under Shravanam, hearing. Shravanam, 1. Hearing of the holy name of the Lord, Shravanam, is the beginning of devotional service. Although any one of the 9 processes is sufficient, in chronological order, the hearing of the holy name of the Lord is the beginning. Indeed, it is essential. Now I'm going to the first sentence of the second paragraph. Hearing from the text of Srimad Bhagavatam is considered the most important process of hearing. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of transcendental chanting of the holy name, and therefore the chanting and hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam are transcendentally full of mellows. In Srimad Bhagavatam, great devotees like Shukadev Goswami have specifically described Lord Krishna's holy name, form, and qualities. Unless one hears about the holy name, form, and qualities of the Lord, one cannot clearly understand the other processes of devotional service. Hearing about the activities of Krishna is the beginning of purified life. Punya Shravana Kirtana. Simply by hearing and chanting, one becomes purified. Therefore, in discharging devotional service, Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, is most important. Then, with purified senses, one begins to render service to the Lord. Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevanam, Bhakti Ruchate. This is called bhakti. So, the sound of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explaining what devotional service is, explaining the philosophical underpinnings of devotional life, explaining who he is exactly, explaining what the process of devotional service is, explaining what attracts him, what he likes. And the sound of devotees glorifying him, that's the Bhagavatam. So you have the Bhagavad Gita as Krishna glorifying or explaining himself. You have the Bhagavatam, pure devotees of Krishna, glorifying Krishna, explaining who Krishna is. When one vibrates these sounds from one's own mouth, with one's own vocal cords, and that sound enters into your ears, you become enlightened. And even before you become enlightened, your mind becomes controlled without separate endeavor. Just like now you're hearing me speak. At least some of you may be attentive because Hare Krishna, whatever. You don't have to control your mind separately. Of course, maybe when the kids, then you have to go around and then fix it, concentrate. But in general, when you're talking with someone you love or someone you trust, and you're interested in what they say, so therefore, the mind, which is very difficult to control. How difficult to control? Like the wind, like trying to catch the wind with your hands. Vayor eva dushkaram. Arjun said this to Krishna. Arjun was one of the greatest souls ever to walk the earth. He was a pure devotee of Krishna and a eternal associate of Krishna, friend, personal friend of Krishna. So qualified. And yet when Krishna explained that you have to control your mind, and he gave the process of Astanga Yoga, Arjun said, sorry, I can't do that. That's too much for me, I'm a warrior, I'm a father, I'm a king, this is too much. I can't do that. And then Krishna said to Arjuna, don't worry. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenan taratpana shadhavan lapajate yomam sama yukta tamomataha. If you just remember me, fix your mind on me, that person is the best yogi. That is my opinion. With faith, shadavan bhajate yomam. So the process of devotional service, the process of hearing and chanting, empowers all the other processes. Without the hearing and chanting, all the other processes will become mundane over time, and they'll become a burden. But if you're serving with the enlightenment that comes from hearing and chanting about who Krishna is and how wonderful he is and how he's providing everything for us, a natural gratitude which is there in the hearts of everyone awakens. Then you can remember Krishna. Then you can glorify Krishna. You can get the strength, the taste, which will help us to avoid our mental and intellectual masturbation. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam. Kalo nasteva, nasteva, nasteva gatiranyata. There's no alternative in the Kali Yuga. Kalo nasteva, nasteva, nasteva. So it's not mechanical. It's not a ritual. It's not just a tradition. I'm not doing it just because my parents told me to do it, etc., etc., etc. It's a living thing, a living process. The mind and the senses must be purified, and the process of purification is hearing. Without proper and sufficient hearing, one cannot know what to do, how to feel, think, feel, will, and act in devotional service. And we will, for sure, be distracted by the cacophony of mental manufactured problems in our consciousness. Hare Krishna. And that's my thought for the day. I was told I have until 1/4 and it's 1/4. Exactly. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Thank you for your wonderful ears and hearts. Hare Krishna. Thank you.